Hello, in this presentation I'm going to be sharing some ideas on how to develop musicianship in your instrumental lessons. And I'll be showing you some videos that I did over lockdown to send over to my String Babies classes. So my String Babies classes are the groups I teach of 2 to 5-year-olds, and I teach violin to them, but they have a 15-minute session in which, as you can imagine, they last for about 5 to 10 minutes maximum with the violin in their hands, and then they want to move on to something different because their attention span is very short. So you have to have lots and lots of different activities to keep them engaged. But they have to be still something that will develop them, their musicality, musicianship, understanding of music, musical concepts, terminology, notation, etc., etc. So I'll be showing you these videos because probably you're thinking that you're not planning on teaching young children, so it might not apply to you. But they're actually activities that I do use with my first access class also, and in my small group teaching, mainly because I've seen the really positive results in these very young children that I teach that I can then apply to my older children also. And I can either use the activities as they are or tweak them slightly so that they fit more their age and their ability as well. So the main aim of the activities is to instill a love of music in the children. And this is done basically by getting them to understand the language of it, of how the music is, because I'm a firm believer that if you want to play musically and with sensitivity, you need to be able to understand the language of music in the first place. And this is done basically by a lot of listening to music, not just listening in the background of music, but careful listening, which is what I'm trying to achieve with these activities. The way I plan the String Babies lessons is that I will pick a piece of music, and it tends to be a piece of popular classical music from a well-known composer, and we explore it from lots of different angles. So we'll move to it, then we'll play a percussion accompaniment to it, and then we play on our violins. It would be like an arrangement of it so that it fits with the music in the very limited range of notes that they can play. And then we might do a parachute piece where we move in the parachute to the music also to explore, say, dynamics, form, etc., etc. So that's what we're trying to do, is actually really get to know that piece of music really well from inside and out, experiencing lots and lots of different ways. And we'll also do a section on pitch training, which in that section I tend to use the Kodai method. So I'm now going to talk about the danger of just using tutor books in your instrumental lesson and just working, because what I find is that when you're doing like small group lessons, the format tends to be you might do a bit of technique, possibly a few warm-ups, and then you sort of work on a piece, which is fine, but it does give quite a limited musical education in the sense that they're experiencing those musical concepts in a very watered down kind of situation. And by this I mean, say for example, the beginner experience, in which their tutor book starts with, say, 3 notes. So they would only be exposed to tunes where there's 3 notes, which is very limiting and also not very inspiring. It's a tune with only 3 notes in it. So pitch-wise, they have a very small range that they're being exposed to. The same thing with dynamics. They might have in their music, they might have piano written or forte, but there's nothing in comparison to what they might feel as a dynamic if they listen to an orchestral piece. An orchestral piece will give them so much bigger range dynamic wise than just one of these pieces that they're playing out of their book. Same thing with timbre. It might be that they've been playing for years and all they've really been exposed to is themselves playing on their violin plus a backing track that might just have a piano in it. And some of these backing tracks are actually not very good quality music. They like synthesizers, kind of sounds of strings or other instruments. So it's making sure that whatever experience we're giving to our pupils, that it's a true musical experience and of a rich quality rather than just a watered down version of a musical experience. Also, things like rhythm, you can notice that in these tutor books, they probably just have crotchets and then moving on to minims for ages, and then eventually they introduce them to quavers, which makes rhythm quite boring in a way because if you're playing a piece just with crotchets and minims, there's just no excitement to it or anything. And what beginners really love doing is playing fast, and it's they don't get to do that till quite far on. When in fact they're quite capable of, at least in strings. I'm not sure about in other instruments, but for strings to play quavers is actually easier than to play really long notes where you have to be a lot slower in your movement, more delicate. So this is why I think it's very important to introduce them to actual real pieces of music played by people that are professionals and, and musicians, and that they can be inspired by these pieces of music and be excited by them, and then they'll be motivated to actually do it on their own instrument also. But also, what I was noticing about lots of my pupils, of my older pupils, that if you ask them, "Oh, do you know who Beethoven is?" or "Do you know who Mozart is?" So there's quite a lot of people that have never heard of these people, and even if you play them a piece, like what you would think like a really, really famous piece of music, they've never heard it before, and so they're not getting that experience of music. And then we are expecting them to speak in that language when we never actually heard it. So how can we expect them to speak the language if they haven't heard it? It's just a bit like a baby learning a language. They need to hear it lots and lots and lots before they can actually start speaking it. And this is why I think it's important for us to actually enrich their musical vocabulary with giving them lots of these pieces and repertoire that they can experience from the very start and not have to wait till, say, they get to Osso, Occhio, Ozo, the older orchestras, which by then they might have stopped playing their instruments and would miss out on what music is all about. So it's that I do tend to use quite a lot is more classical music, because as a violinist, we sort of training them in a kind of classical music side to things. But you can also do it with folk music or rock and pop music. It's whatever your instrument and what you're trying to teach them. You can inspire them with your style of music. So it doesn't have to be all classical music, but it's what I tend to use, because that's, as a violinist, that's what they'll eventually be playing as well, possibly folk as well anyway. But yeah, it's whatever works for you, basically.